as I was walking past, he was backing up, and I realised he'd walked backwards into a torch on the wall. He started screaming, and he was on fire, and he was just on the floor, like, water, water. And his friend was stood next to him, like panicking and stuff. And then he eventually got up and he was fine. And they both carried on doing whatever animation they were doing before. And I find that utterly hilarious.
It came to the conclusion that humans love war, famine, death, disaster, pain. And so it brutally slaughters all of the people at the Halloween party, because that's the conclusion that the AI comes to. That's just another danger of AI in what is it learning.
Hi there, and welcome to Gaming the System with myself, Jem, Alex, and Matt. And today we are continuing our conversation about AI and gaming. This is the second of a two-part AI dive. Last episode we talked about the news that Microsoft and Google were bringing out gaming co-pilots who could support you through your gaming experience. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, check out that episode. Today, I want to talk about when NPCs wake up and the NPC zeitgeist that we have at the moment. So, NPC stands for non-player characters. They're your background characters, providing atmosphere, plot twists and guidance, and sometimes just being there to beat up and kill. In recent years, we've seen this concept of NPC being brought out of the gaming world and into the real world. So NPC can sometimes be thrown around as a bit of an insult. It usually means somebody who conforms, somebody who follows common thinking, who isn't very interesting or doesn't have a lot to bring to the world. It sits alongside the concept of main character energy and this idea that we're all living in some kind of simulation. It can present itself in quite entertaining ways. I don't know if you guys have seen the videos of people pretending to be NPCs and walking around like NPCs, interacting with each other and setting up scenes in a real world scenario. I saw this amazing one the other day where this guy had got everyone on the street, probably about 50 people, involved in setting up this sort of NPC scene. It's a real skill. The physicality of the movement and the way they interact with one another can be really, really impressive to watch and quite fun to see. So there's a lot of people doing it. That's a sort of more positive side of it. I wanted to explore how AI is going to impact NPCs and change the way that NPCs in games behave. I think this is going to be a deep episode. I initially came into it from the news of a project called Portal, which is where they're training AI agents on primarily first-person shooter style games. And they're training them on lots of different games, whereas recently they've been generally training AIs on a game. The AI learns to play a game and then gains skills from that. But what Portal is doing is giving AI software access to multiple first-person shooter games, using those games to teach AI to make quick decisions, tactical decisions, understand what's going on around it and respond appropriately. This is not about AIs playing games. This is about training AIs to be better at whatever it is that they're doing. I did explore this idea about training AIs on first-person shooters, which are defined by their violence and aggression. But it's not about training AIs to go out and shoot people. It's about training AIs to think on their feet, to be quick, to come up with tactics in a variety of settings. I got thinking about the idea of what happens when AIs start interacting with each other within a game. And when we say we want our NPCs to be a bit more realistic, we want them to be having lives that run in the background of our games and not just being on some kind of loop. How will that impact our gaming experience? How will it impact our relationship with the characters in games? How will it shape our understanding of what NPC actually means? At the moment, it can be used as a derogatory term. But if NPCs have almost their own little lives going on in these worlds, is it still a derogatory term? Is it still something we aspire to not be? And what happens if those NPCs suddenly want to be the main characters in their games? I just thought I'd bring this subject to you and see what you guys thought about it. So I'm just going to throw out the first question. Would you like to see NPCs with a bit more autonomy? Would you like to see them being less predictable, less scripted?
No, because with AI, it requires processing power. And with game design, processing power is a premium. If you ask pretty 99% of gamers, would you rather have an AI-generated NPC environment or ray tracing light or a couple of extra frames? I think gamers are always going to choose that. And with NPCs, like, again, I'm really excited about this topic because it relates to the process of game development and the infrastructure of how these games work. And the skill in making games is the appearance of realism. If I walk out my front door and keep walking and swimming long enough, I'll eventually end up back where I am, because the world exists outside of here. But in games, you might think everything exists. When you see a building, you think, oh, there must be an inside to that building, but it's just an empty space because the game developers, you're not going to see it, so it doesn't need to be rendered. The kind of processing power needed to create a truly immersive NPC is just, it would be a scale that makes it unusable, really, because and again, I think writers wouldn't want to do it either, because they want to be in control of the narrative. If you've got an NPC that can do or be anything depending on the situation, it's just unnecessary. The best games already make it feel like the NPCs are real, and there's the difference between like main NPCs and the background NPCs. So with background NPCs, they only need to be a very narrow thing because you're walking past them, and there's a real skill in making those NPCs interesting, because you can have little tidbits of conversation as you walk past. Hitman is the best at this, because you can walk around. I'm still finding new little conversations as I go past. And the illusion of depth with these things is another skill, because they're all normally one body type, male, female. They have a handful of animations and a handful of reactions and lines. What makes up these characters fits very neatly into a streamlined bit of code. You can just slot that in and put it anywhere. Whereas to implement an AI model for an NPC would take a massive amount of space. And even if the idea of an AI being able to play a shooter game as if it was a human that you'd watch. They'd see the sprinting and jumping around, which is what people do in Fortnite. There's jumping and sliding and then jumping because that's the fastest way to move around. And it just feels like there isn't I can't see a really beneficial way of properly leaning into the AI generated NPC, personally.
I hadn't thought about it from a processing perspective, Matt, so thank you for shining a light on that. I think it depends on the type of game as to how interesting it could get. I was thinking while you were talking about the pros and cons and kind of weighing it up in my head, and I think definitely I am currently too attached to the silly behaviour of NPCs that you find currently in games. I can give you plenty of examples, but when NPCs do stupid things or say scripted lines over and over, it becomes sort of this in-joke within the game. It's part of the fun in games like Oblivion and Skyrim. Everyone knows the lines are, I took an arrow to the knee and now I can't be an adventurer anymore. Or would you like a taste of my sweet rolls? You know, everyone loves those sorts of lines. And then you've got the sorts of things that happen quite spontaneously as well. I was playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and there were these two men in a small cave opening. I was walking very slowly between them, sort of trying to be natural and finding my way to the next mission marker. One of them started talking to me, and as I was walking past, he was backing up. And as I'd gone by, I realised he'd walked backwards into a torch on the wall because he'd started screaming and he was on fire and he was just on the floor like, water, water. And his friend was stood next to him like panicking and stuff. And then he eventually got up and he was fine. And they both carried on doing whatever animation they were doing before. And I find that utterly hilarious. And that's one of the things I love about gaming in an open world, particularly all those types of games, is that NPCs are just very silly fun. It's so funny the types of things you can get to happen, particularly if you start throwing explosives at them or something. You know, you just muck around. It's part of having the fun of the game. So if AI were to get involved, there is scope for more chaos that way, but it won't quite be the same as it is now. I feel like we'd lose some of the traditional fun of gaming with NPCs and what you come to expect from the way they behave. We all know how we expect them to behave, and part of it I find very funny, like the way they're animated, the way they move through scenes. Or I don't know if you guys have seen all the mods that they've done to Oblivion where they get them to move super fast and then they'll sort of ragdoll around. I find that hilarious as well. I think it could be an interesting experiment in an open world game, but if there's a story-led game, it certainly wouldn't work because that would throw your story right out of whack. If the AI started trying to do something off-piste, it would break the game. So you wouldn't want it in a game that it has to have structure, otherwise you'd lose all control.
The only
so it's interesting
instance that I can think of where an AI-led character development thing is, of course, the Nemesis system.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
From the Mordor, Middle-earth Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor game, where it feels like every single orc chief that you face feels like a completely unique character. They all have their own names, they all have their own dialogue, but it is randomly, procedurally generated, their attributes, then the way that they've killed you, and then
their strengths and weaknesses.
So that's the best that it's been done so far. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers somehow managed to copyright the Nemesis system.
Yes.
While Words with Friends has ripped off Scrabble over a decade now with no problem. Apparently, the studio that made the Middle-earth games had been working on a Wonder Woman game that had the Nemesis system integrated into it somehow. And Warner Brothers cancelled it.
Oh, yeah. That is frustrating.
The guiding light of AI-generated NPCs is dead.
It is frustrating because I've never seen anything like that system in any other game, and I thought it was fantastic. The way that if you killed an orc, it might come back and remember you, and then it would have extra strength because it was on a vengeance mission, or it would have its arm missing where you'd cut it off the time before, or an eye
cut
patch.
them in half.
Yeah, exactly. They'd come back, but they'd come back more and more injured and more changed, and it was just fascinating. I think it was brilliant. You sort of built up relationships with these orcs. You suddenly become even more of a bigger enemy that you'd have to drop everything and fight. Because you're like, oh no, he's back again. We need to get him.
And it's satisfying turning them to your side as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a real shame that has been copyrighted and seemingly taken out of the gaming sphere. Because I think that definitely, I agree, Matt, does have potential to be a way for AI to maybe integrate itself into the world of NPCs.
I think you make really interesting points there. The processing issue is a big factor when it comes to AI. The effect of autonomous NPC characters on scripts and storylines could be quite calamitous, really, if it wasn't properly managed. It really appeals to me because when I was coding on the text-based game that I helped out with, one of the things I was heavily involved with was NPC characters that had very involved scripts and therefore could actually trigger certain actions based on the actions of the players. Now, that sounds like what NPCs do these days, but back then in text form, that wasn't something that happened. I loved the idea that, as a player, you would walk into a room and there would be this whole scene just playing out before you without any actual seeming activity on your part. The trigger was player enters room, then the scene would play on. So, but if another player came into the room, it would carry on. You had this semblance that these NPCs were living an existence beyond the actual players. That really appealed to me, and I think that's why the idea is really exciting. I wonder what would happen if NPCs became more realistic and more sort of autonomous. Would there be an increased chance of players connecting with those NPCs? More likelihood of emotional connections or parasocial connections? I think it would be very easy for that to become more intense if these NPC characters felt more real, made more engaging decisions. Let's think more about them in the open world games. Maybe in Horizon, have somebody that you visit who happens to live in this one particular camp, and you could create a connection with that NPC. Would that be a good thing? Would it be a bad thing? Is it just a crazy thing?
I think that we've talked in the last episode about the pitfalls of AI in terms of its reliability, because AI can hallucinate and then all of a sudden we have Skynet and it's nuked the planet out of nowhere. We've all played games where an NPC isn't where they're meant to be, or they're stuck somewhere, and then you can't progress until you've found this NPC. Having an NPC that can pretend it's the player, if you give an NPC the ability to do anything that the player can do, the possibilities are too broad, and most likely the more complex and involved something becomes, the AI is going to get less and less consistent in the way that it reacts to things, which is why all NPCs at the moment have a very narrow set of things that they're able to do, so that they don't break out and start interacting in the world in a way that, as Alex said, breaks the game. When it comes to main characters, the one who should definitely behave like a main character should be the main antagonist, because they're the ones that you're pushing against, and that's what makes the story happen. And it should be like with Negan in The Walking Dead. If we'd started the series from Negan's point of view, that would have been just as fascinating as seeing it from Rick's point of view from the start. And that's how you should feel about the supporting NPC characters. But then if you're going through like the crowds in Assassin's Creed games, the NPCs are built in the way that they don't need to be complicated. They don't all need to be complex and sophisticated. They just need to be there as you walk past. You don't think, there's no one here in this street, or they're all doing the same thing. It can break your immersion even if there are lots of people. In Cyberpunk 2077, one of the Angry Joe guys pointed out that they're all the same height. Then you go, well, if you had them doing the exact same thing and they were different heights, the randomized appearance of them is critical as well, because even playing Cyberpunk 27 last year, there were like 5 different character models. You can just walk down the main street and there are 4 copies of the same NPC walking along. And so the skill of making good NPCs is making them appear realistic. And we don't need it to be as realistic. The developers need the writing skill and the design skill to make these NPCs flesh out the world.
Which can be done with AI, just like very restricted set of guidelines. I completely agree with you that you have to have restrictions, otherwise it would just get crazy and distracting. It would stop being a street scene and start being a game in itself. Yeah. It would be overwhelming from a player perspective.
If you walk through it and just play it, it feels like a completely like organic ecosystem of NPCs, but beneath it there are very clearly defined subsections. So you've got, in a crowd, there are crowd NPCs that don't count as like characters. If you hit one of them with a stun dart, they'll die, and they're there to just make the world fill out. And then there are interactable NPCs that move around. The other ones stay where they are basically, and the interactive NPCs are the ones that have their loops and react to things properly. And then you've got the enforcers, which are the guards, and the targets. Every single thing that you see on the map has their very limited set of behaviors and reactions to things. And together, it feels really organic. That's the role the AI plays. If you want to be able to set fire to every NPC, like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you could go, NPCs can't be set on fire. Or the NPC, like, if you do set it on fire, they could die. You don't just roll around in the sand for a bit and then go back to standing exactly where they were. So it is an effective and efficient way of using AI that I think is what people should be aiming for.
I was going to ask you both, had you heard about the debacle with Darth Vader in Fortnite? I hadn't heard about it at all. It was reported in May this year. Basically, they put the character of Darth Vader in Fortnite so that when I don't know how Fortnite works, I've never played it, but basically when you get to the ground or whatever, Darth Vader would be there and you could have a conversation with him in real time. He would tell you when something was about to go down, like maybe when the map shrinks. So they used AI to get his voice right, essentially. They used James Earl Jones. I think he did work to have his voice preserved for Disney, but then they've used it like this, which isn't the best. And it ended up being part of the SAG-AFTRA thing, but also through conversations with players, very quickly Darth Vader would start swearing at players and got a little bit racist. I'm not sure exactly of the context, but I think it's an important lesson if you're going to drop AI into an environment with a toxic gaming community. Your AI is going to pick up toxic habits, and so it proved to be true. So I think there's a risk there. You could have an AI character companion you can talk with, but what kind of responses are you going to get? How is it learning from its environment? Is it picking up all these toxic habits from the people around it?
There's a fabulous mission I've just remembered from Fallout 4. It's a short Halloween mission where you go to this exclusive club thing, and it's full of dead people and people who have been driven insane by some kind of gas that's in there, and it's gassing you as well. And if you read through the terminals, you find messages from the programmer who does all the tech stuff.
Yeah.
He'd been playing with the new AI interface to make it spookier. It got so good that eventually he was fired. On his last day, he got drunk. He was training it to come up with scary Halloween spooky party ideas. And so he'd been sending it, putting in like literature, like all the scary horror novels from the last century, and it would come up with the things that it learned from that and go, okay, ghosts, zombies, tombstones, graveyards, etc. And then on his last day, he submitted all the newspapers and news programs from the last century. 100 years worth of war, famine, disease, death, disaster, pain. And it came to the conclusion that humans love war, famine, death, disaster, pain. And so it brutally slaughters all of the people at the Halloween party, because that's the conclusion that the AI comes to. That's just another danger of AI in what is it learning?
Yeah.
And how it's going to do it. Using the estate of James Earl Jones selling his voice is just awful. And just repellent.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened as a result of this Darth Vader AI was that there was a lot of complaints and things around the use of people's voices in this sort of scenario. So it certainly raised that issue. And I think there's a thing about learning. It was swearing and saying all sorts of inappropriate stuff. That's why one of the key watchwords around AI is always guardrails. We have to put guardrails in for any of this, whatever we're going to be using AI for. We need to have guardrails put in place about what we as a society want, what we think is acceptable and isn't acceptable, to ensure that these things don't end up murdering humanity. But I'm not going to go down that route because it gets quite depressing quite quickly. All of the AI things that have been created so far are not self-aware, they're not sentient. Depending on who you speak to, we're either a year away or 20 years away from reaching that point. Let's say they're not sentient, but they are semi-autonomous within a game environment. What does it do to people, and generally younger people, who are the biggest gaming group, to attack these NPCs, kill these NPCs, they're collateral damage as part of the game, they're the zombies that you're slaughtering, they're the bad guys that you're shooting. What does that do to gamers when they become more realistic and seemingly real?
I think this can be written, designed conventionally, because for the only time that I've felt properly bad about killing an NPC that I'm meant to be killing is in The Last of Us Part 2. Because when you're fighting the enemies and you kill one, they'll go, Lily, no! And it just makes you feel like, oh my god, all these people have names. And they react when I kill one of them. If they didn't say their names, then I wouldn't react that way. It depends on the type of game. If you've got a game where the point is killing people, then the tone of it doesn't need to be, there are no bad people, there are just damaged people. And you're being bad by killing these flawed people. Whereas we just need it to be nice and simple. Some people are bad guys, and you need people and things to kill and come up against. Not everything needs to be deep. It comes down to educating younger people.
There is research being done. It's called LARP, which you might have heard is live action role play, but they're calling it language agent role play for open world games. And they have created AIs that have impressive problem solving skills with defined settings and brief timelines, yet with ever evolving complexities of the open world simulations. They have the flexibility to adapt to those complex environments. They include a cognitive architecture that encompasses memory processing and decision making, with the ability to interact with their environment and learn from feedback within that action space. So they are actually creating personalities based around that information that's coming into them within these game settings. So that they are able then to hold this information and create consistent personalities which continue to evolve in these scenarios. So I expect a lot of this role play is coming as a result of the chat bots, the boyfriend, girlfriend, partner bots that we're seeing. There is research going into this. They are being created already. And I think the fact that we are people who probably think about this stuff a lot more than the average person out there, because we're interested in these topics. We're interested in the intersection between technology and society and gaming and equality and accessibility. We don't have the answers or know what the guardrails need to be or how this could benefit or harm these gaming environments. And I think there's a lot of research and stuff going on out there without any of these questions having been understood or even considered. It worries me. I mean, on one hand, I'm extremely excited about what AI might bring and the sort of future is now and all that sci-fi excitement. But then on the other hand, it's quite terrifying what this could unleash on a very unsuspecting set of brains.
Yeah, I definitely think with a well-written NPC, you have a chance to build a lot of engagement from the player, so the player feels more engaged and invested in the game as a whole. I think that's a positive impact from having a well-rounded NPC. Matt was talking about the most stressed he'd ever felt hurting an NPC. I think for me, it's when there's animal companions involved. So, for example, in Ghost of Tsushima, I was practicing a stance and accidentally swung my sword into my horse, Sora. He went, "Ooh," and ran away. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry, Sora, please stay." Because I'd already formed the bond. Because whenever you get on your horse, Jen will say, "You deserve the best, boy." Or like, "One day we will go for a peaceful ride." And you're like, I want this to happen on his horse. And you build up that relationship. So to actually hurt Sora without realising that it can happen, I was really upset. I was like, oh no, my horse is hurt. And that's probably the most emotional reaction I've had to attacking a non-playable character, albeit by accident. But yeah, definitely. I think as humans or as animal lovers, or I think we probably all are animal lovers, animals in games, they have a very big emotional connection and they barely need to do anything. They just need to look vaguely like an animal. It's interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think we've dug really deep, but I also feel like we've only scraped the surface of this topic. It is a really interesting one and will continue to perplex and vex us as we go forward and as more and more layers are peeled off this whole AI world. An interesting conversation around AI and what might happen if the NPCs start to wake up. And thank you both so much for your input. Fascinating and enlightening as always. We're here every Thursday with some interesting gaming related content. We'd love to hear what you think about AI and gaming and what you think about AI and NPCs, and will we all soon be NPCs in our own computer games going forward? And yeah, check us out every Thursday. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.